Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, it's Christmas in just a few days' time, and the UK Civil Aviation Authority has stated on record that Santa has been given the all-clear to enter British airspace. Hopefully that means everyone will get a present, even if times are still tough. A real-life Father Christmas, Reverend Nims Obunge, MBE, runs this community food hub here in the capital, and he invited me to a Christmas special open house, a vital lifeline for households still struggling with the cost of living in Britain. And Rishi Sunak may have had an early Christmas gift with the dramatic fall of inflation last month, but his huge in-tray is likely to see him working during the holidays. Our Downing Street correspondent Simon Pusey will shortly be joining me here in the studio with an update from Number 10. Then later, I'll be bringing you the lowdown of the biggest business news stories of the week. But first, on Tuesday, the former UK Labour Party Chancellor Alistar Darling was remembered at a public memorial service in Edinburgh, attended by the likes of Sir Tony Blair, Sir Keir Starmer and Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling. The Labour leaders, past and present, were joined by colleagues, including the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, the current Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves and former Tory Chancellor of the Exchequer George Osborne. Darling died late last month, aged 70, after a stay in hospital where he was being treated for cancer. The service followed a private cremation which took place on Monday. Greenpeace UK and climate campaigner Uplift have filed separate legal challenges in Scotland, seeking to rescind government approval for the Rosebank oil development in the North Sea. The campaigners argue that consent for the $3.8 billion project is incompatible with Britain's climate change plans and ignores the emissions that will be created by burning the oil from the field. The government is strongly rejecting the claims and says they will robustly defend any such challenge. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Oluwaseun Awogbenle, who is a development and public policy professional. Oluwaseun joins me from Bournemouth. Oluwaseun Awogbenle, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global, and of course compliments of the season. One of the big stories from earlier this week is that UK climate groups, including Greenpeace, they're launching legal action against the UK government to try and prevent the development of Rosebank, which is of course the UK's largest untapped North Sea oil field. Now, apart from many reasons, one of the main complaints from the consortium is that the development of Rosebank is not compatible with the British government's plans to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Are you surprised that the UK appears to be backtracking on its position as being a leader when it comes to the world on renewable energy?
Well, I think that first, disappointing is actually the word that is the least word that describes it, and this is essentially because you've actually seen world leaders too many times say something and then act differently, and that's entirely the case in this situation. For the United Kingdom, it would not only be responsible to go ahead with the Rosebank's development, because it is inconsistent with the net zero target and commitment of the United Kingdom to meet net zero target by 2050, but also because most, if not all, the advanced economies are actually responsible for where we are today in terms of the greenhouse effect that has resulted in global warming. Just to provide a little bit of context, the quest for economic activities over time, production, mining, exploration, industrialization, from the first to the second, third, even up until the fourth industrial revolution, is what has led to the accumulation of greenhouse gases that continue to trap heat from sunlight. And then, of course, we have now seen cases of desertification, rising sea levels, and even Africa, that has been the least contributor to the global emission mix, is also facing is bearing a disproportionate brunt of the global warming, as the case may be. I mean, in Africa, you're likely to have seen desertification, you're likely to have seen flooding, erosion, eating communities, even in Africa, that's contributed just about 4% of the global emission mix. And science has, in fact, established that for us to be able to meet net zero target by 2050 and limit global temperature to 1.5 Celsius, above pre-industrial levels by 2050, which would, of course, be bearable for all of us and will make the continent livable. It means that we would need to move away from fossil fuel.
Yeah.
And that was why it was a serious, there was a lot of, confrontation, as the case may be, at COP28 in Dubai, where different countries of the world had different opinions. But eventually, one of the landmark agreements from COP28 is that we would need to now transition away from fossil fuel gradually. And of course, what that means is that countries that are already in OPEC, that already have investment in oil, would begin to need to shrink those investments. And it means that countries that hitherto not invested in oil and gas cannot go into new investment. And that's why this is actually disappointing, right? Because
you're absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right there. And it does bring me nicely into my next question. We don't have much time, I'm afraid, Oluwaseun, but you have raised COP. Of course, we just come off the end of COP28. And one of the things that are missing from this particular lawsuit, but is the mood music amongst African leaders, is the hypocrisy, right? The fact that, you've got the West, you've got the global North, preaching to the global South about their transition, when, of course, we know that the Industrial Revolution, the cradle of that, and where we are, began in London. There have been so many pledges about climate finance. African countries have been put under pressure, and they've been vocal about their need for accelerated private investment and technical support. Is this going to happen? If it's not going to happen, Sean, what are the stumbling blocks that are preventing these funds for adaptation and mitigation getting into the hands of those who desperately need it?
Well, would it happen? Yeah, it has to happen. So it's no longer a debate of whether or not it has to happen. I mean, we have to transition. We need to move gradually. We need to explore renewable energy sources. We need to, recycle. Industries also have to adopt new technology to be able to reduce their emission. So now the point about Africa is that, one, Africa is, like I emphasized earlier, Africa is bearing a disproportionate brunt of global warming, as it contributes just about 4%. China and the United States of America, for example, contribute the largest emission. In fact, I think that the whole of Africa's, emission is not even half, is not up to half of what China is emitting, and possibly the United States. So that shows that, in one way, it is true that. And maybe because, of course, Africa has also not attained some level of growth. Most African countries are still underdeveloped, or they are mostly developing countries. But now it then means that, and that's why I was quite disappointed that African leaders felt like COP28 was actually a charade, when in fact it was a serious business. Yeah. I expected them to actually get more deals out of COP28. The best they could get out was $700 million, as some fund to support countries that are struggling with meeting the transitioning away from a traditional economy, from an oil and gas economy, is going to cost a lot of money. And I don't think $700 million is what will cut it for most African countries.
No, you're right about that. And you're right about the fact that there was a lot of disappointment. However, we know, and I was on the ground in Dubai, Oluwaseun, that a lot of the deals take place away from COP, on the sidelines. I know, of course, Nigeria signed that landmark agreement with Germany on Siemens, didn't they? But you have raised some really pertinent points. And, with all of those transitions you just mentioned, it's going to cost a lot of money. But I know the change makers do watch, and they are listening. So hopefully they've written down some of those points there, and we'll bring you back in the new year to expand on them further. Thank you so much for your expertise and insights, Oluwaseun Awogbenle, who is a development and public policy professional on sabbatical from work, I think, in the United Kingdom at the moment. Thank you so much for your time, Oluwaseun.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Senior Tories have defended the Prime Minister's rhetoric on immigration during a speech in Rome over the weekend. Speaking to the party of his Italian counterpart, Giorgia Meloni, Rishi Sunak warned that migrants could overwhelm European countries and called for radical solutions to tackle the issue.
Criminal gangs will find ever cheaper ways to ply their evil trade. They will exploit our humanity, and they think nothing of putting people's lives at risk when they put them in these boats at sea. And our enemies will also see that we are unable to deal with this, and then they will so increasingly use migration as a weapon, deliberately driving people to our shores to try to destabilize our societies. So if we do not tackle this problem, the numbers will only grow. It will overwhelm our countries and our capacity to help those who actually need our help the most.
Back here in Britain on Tuesday afternoon, Rishi Sunak faced one final grilling from MPs before Christmas as he sat in front of the liaison committee of senior MPs. Sunak refused to give an update cost of his flagship Rwanda scheme, which has so far cost over £240 million. He also said the increasingly complex, hostile international environment is one of the greatest challenges facing the UK. The supergroup is made up of the chairs of all other committees, and its job is to scrutinise the Prime Minister's work. Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Compliments of the season, Simon. I see you got the wardrobe memo.
Thank you.
It hasn't been an easy run up to Christmas for the Prime Minister, although he did get an early present with inflation figures. They've certainly more than halved since he promised that at the beginning of the year. But he did have quite an intense grilling at the liaison committee, as to be expected. They touched upon COP28, of course, the global crises that we have and domestic issues. How do you think he performed?
Yeah, and that inflation figure is really important for him because obviously those 5 pledges, that's the only one that he's nailing.
Yeah.
And it's going very well, so he can make a big deal out of that, whereas the other 4 not going so well. So yeah, this is 90 minutes of questions by senior MPs, happens twice a year. The Prime Minister is called in to basically sort of talk about his policies, talk about government policy, what's going right, what's going wrong. And he's there kind of grilled for the public and just to kind of keep him under the spotlight, which is another sort of checks and balance, as well as sort of Prime Minister questions and Parliament. And so, yeah, a range of issues. The Rwanda thing is sort of the main thing that people are speculating on at the moment, because it's not going well for the government. And things like he's refusing to talk about the costs. He's saying this is a commercial thing. That's because it's very embarrassing, these costs. It's already been £150 million that's been spent, and no one has been sent to Rwanda. No. And this is their big policy. I mean, more, foreign secretaries have gone to Rwanda, or home secretaries, than, any...
Than migrants.
Than any illegal migrants, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of an embarrassing thing for him, and he was told by the chair that he was wrong to claim that costings can be held back on commercial grounds. So he's doing his best to not talk about, the cost.
He was Chancellor, wasn't he?
Well, of course,
when Boris Johnson introduced the scheme.
And it's just very embarrassing for him. So you can see why he wouldn't want to talk about the costs, because it is embarrassing. He was also he was asked about how Lord Cameron can be held to account. Yes, so obviously been brought back by the government, but he sits in the House of Lords. So he can't be questioned in the House of Commons, and that's sort of quite odd for our system of government to not be able to hold someone to account or scrutinise.
Lots of foreign issues.
Exactly. So most people thought when he brought him back, there's going to be some kind of deal or some changes to the rules that means that he can be scrutinised, or that. And he was saying he can't see a case for a new mechanism being set up. That was quite surprising, I think, in the Select Committee yesterday. And then talking about obviously Gaza, he was saying too many citizens are dying, but he was saying that a sustainable ceasefire can't take place until.
Pushed on that, wasn't he?
Yeah, until hostages are released, whilst hostages still being held. Hopefully in the coming days might see some movement there, because I think one of the leaders of Hamas is meeting with people to talk about a ceasefire. I think the main thing that we were seeing in the Select Committee was that he's always on his brief, obviously Rishi Sunak, but he seems to be on it. He seems to still think that there's a chance the Conservatives can win when no one else does. Even in his own government, privately, people are saying, of course. And then you've got Bradman, Robert Jenrick, people leaving the government or people stepping back to try and position themselves for a future leadership race. But he seems to still think that the phrase "a week is a long time in politics." You never know what could happen. You never know what can go wrong,
especially
for
over
Labour.
Christmas.
Exactly. So he's still got a huge deficit to Labour in the polls, but he seems to be fighting for every single point.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think the only thing left to say is have a happy Christmas, and I'm sure even though we may get a short break, I don't think the Prime Minister is going to be putting down that pen on Christmas Day.
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas, Simon. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. In a moment, I'll be sharing some footage from a Christmas food bank in Tottenham, North London. But until then, here's a breakdown of some of the biggest business news stories of the week. Toshiba, the Japanese company synonymous with the country's 20th century dominance of electronics, has delisted from the Tokyo Stock Exchange after 74 years. The historic development follows years of activist investor pressure on the firm after turmoil caused by an enormous accounting scandal, raising questions about the country's insular corporate governance model. The conglomerate is being taken private by a group of investors at a cost of $14 billion US. On their last trading day, Tuesday, shares ended down 0.1%. The UK government will introduce a carbon border tax from 2027 for imports of emission-intensive goods from countries deemed to have weaker climate regimes. This follows a similar move by the European Union. The Treasury said charges under the carbon border adjustment mechanism will vary, and the tax would support domestic producers and reduce emissions. Industry groups welcomed the plan, but warned that the proposed start date of 2027 was too late. According to the retailer John Lewis, sales of engagement rings are up 85% year on year, with diamonds remaining the most popular stone. With Christmas lights adorned in most towns, villages and historic properties across Britain, some observers suggest it is this romantic, magical backdrop that is convincing young people to pop the question. Christmas engagement pictures are known to do particularly well on social media, with the hashtag engagement now gathering over 18.5 billion views on TikTok. Now to my final topic. With Christmas just a few days away, hundreds of thousands of people have been out and about looking for presents at a time when the cost of living crisis is still a major issue for millions of people in this country. We ventured out of the studio and into the cold to speak with some of them.
I'm not working, so I am really struggling to do Christmas this year.
The budget is a lot tighter this year, but maybe in previous years I would have been a £50 to £100 person.
I'm not a big spender, so personally I don't feel this exterior pressure to spend a lot at Christmas. I feel the people, at least I'm around, the appreciation is just in the thought rather than the actual gift.
I don't like the expression the high street is dying. I mean, everything adapts. You know, it's like layers of an onion. You know, you strip something off, something else replaces it. So I think in time the high street will evolve, and hopefully perhaps maybe some independence would be rather good rather than some of the global brands. But I think generally London is, you know, very much on everyone's bucket list to visit. So we have to give the tourist or those people visiting London a great experience. So hopefully the black cab, that side of things, and the iconic scenario is still very much very prominent. So hopefully we'll be around for, hopefully in my case, another 27 years.
Just a few miles north from here, members of this community will be satisfied with just a decent meal at Christmas. Tottenham's real-life Santa Claus, Reverend Nims Obunge MBE, runs this community food hub 3 days a week, providing nutritionally balanced emergency food to those who need it most. Talk to me about the reasons why you're here this afternoon.
Well, basically, we've got no money for shopping, we've got no money for presents. Everybody wants to have a good Christmas. This year, we can't financially support that. There's no work here. You can't knock on a neighbour's door anymore and ask for anything. The community is very shut down here now. Nobody wants to go out. No neighbours want to talk to you anymore. Things have changed here. There's no job opportunities no more. You know, nobody knocks on your door to see if you're all right anymore. You know, nobody opens the door to let you come in anymore. You see old people struggling to get on the buses. Nobody cares. People fighting in the queue to even get in here to get food. So things are really hard here. Things ain't like they used to be. There used to be a lot of money here. There's no money here now.
So I think Christmas is a very interesting time for people. I think it's very synonymous with, food, festivities, family, friends, and a lot of people in our community are struggling to afford the necessities such as food. So I think especially at Christmas, when it's about a time of coming together, supporting each other, it's really important, but particularly as well because of the weather. So what I know from working here is that a lot of people's bills go up in the winter, so they're spending more money on, gas, electricity, and they've got less money in their pockets for things like food, and then you can imagine like buying gifts as well for their kids or for each other. It's really, really hard. So I think at this time particularly, it's good because people understand Christmas and they are a lot more generous, but they also want to give to people who don't have, as much as well.
What is the reality of post-pandemic Britain like? Can you explain just how difficult it is?
I think I'll try by kind of giving people a snapshot. So there could be someone who comes here, maybe they've had a health diagnosis, so they're not able to work. And then the money that they get in through benefits is a limited amount of money. And through research, we've seen that that money that they're given is not enough to cover the essentials. So essentially, they're given a finite amount of money and it doesn't stretch all the way. So they have no choice but to turn to a food hub or food bank like ours. It could be another case of someone's lost their job. So they've been in stable employment, but they've hit, a rough time. And because of that, they've had to go on benefits. So again, they're getting a limited amount of money. So they don't have enough money to cover the cost of everything. Like we know with the cost of living, the prices of things have gone astronomically high. So they have no choice but to come to a place like the food bank or food hub because it's a way for them to kind of keep as much money in their pockets as they can.
Well, Julian, it's great to have you here at this Christmas season. I remember 4 years ago, we started something of a food bank operation because we heard kids were going to school without food. Now we have a moment where we have a cost of living crisis that's impacting all of the UK. And in North London, being able to give food to so many members of our community. We have over 2,000 people on our database, and at any given week we have an excess of 600 plus people coming to our doors collecting food like this. And this Christmas in particular, I'm excited because not only are we giving them food, but we're ensuring that every single child, several hundred kids, are going to get Christmas gifts. And that's really special. So not only are we giving them food to go home with, on Sunday, they're coming over here, and we're going to have hundreds of people collecting gifts, hampers, just to go home with and celebrate the greatest gift of all. We believe it's Christ, but it's great to give food and gifts. We have so many different backgrounds of families, some who've been laid off jobs, some who are underemployed, some who are without employment, and some who are refugees who've come from the likes of Ukraine. And so we have so many different families in this space. And I think what we've said our responsibility is we don't ask you your life circumstances, but we care enough for you to know that if you don't have enough to feed your family, we have a registration process, and we've identified that there are some, in any of the 600 plus or more people that we give, each person represents a home of maybe 2.5 kids. So we recognize that you're here not representing yourself as an individual, but you're representing your family. In some cases, we have families that have up to 7 kids, but we recognize we can't give all to feed that particular family. So what we've identified is we've created a roadmap, identifying other food providers in the neighborhood so that we can support. We're the largest providers in this area, but there are others that might provide a little bit more to add to what already exists out there. And our responsibility is just to try and support those families to get more for those kids.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Merry Christmas.